Thank you. Thank you for your introduction, Chairman. And thanks Aladdin, thanks Sibals, and thanks Carl for the invitation. It's my great pleasure and honor to share our ideas on Chinese trade policies. And to make this presentation, I should give some explanation. The first is I try to give a presentation from China's trade policy, because in China, although we do have some policy arrangement in LAC, but all the trade policies are based on an overall basis. So I start from Chinese trade policy, the overall policy. And second, I want to clarify here, this presentation is based on several academic paper and our almost lasted for 10 years away. So although here I try to leave out some formulas, some data, but there are a lot of work behind this. Okay. In my presentation, I want to talk about three things. The first is China's trade policy. The second is China's trade policy toward LAC, Latin America and Caribbean region. And the third is the direction for the future China-LAC cooperation, especially on the trade policy part. And maybe it's hard to explain very clearly the Chinese trade policy because we have a lot of regulations, laws, and institutions on trade policy. But I try to divide it into three parts. The first part is trade liberalization. That includes tariff, quota, and licensing, something related to this, and also include the laws and regulation related to FDI, because in China, our outward-oriented economy, in our economy, the FDI and trade are correlated to each other. The second part is trade facilitation policies. And the third part is trade protection policies, including some trade remedies. So, in China, since 1979, we start our opening up and reform. Since then we have an open economy, and especially after we access into WTO in the year 2001, you can find Chinese trade and FDI increased rapidly, and to integrate into the world better, China. In our end, we do some reform. We try to do some reform to change our trade policy. In our reform, there are some targets. The first target at very beginning is especially after our entry into WTO. We want to reform toward a liberalized trade. We want to integrate into the world. So at first, we want to encourage our export, and we want to cut down the trade cost. So we want to have a friendly trading environment to improve the trade facilitation. And also, since the year 2005, we began to broaden our FTA network. We try to be a FTA partner of more and more countries. And after years of development, and China want to do more for the world. We want to provide more public goods. So since recent years, we began to provide more market. In the past, we encourage export, but nowadays we also encourage import. we want to have a more open market. And we also want to we will also become a major investor in the world. So we want to facilitate the investment and the trade. And we try to provide public goods. For example, we give 33 African countries free entry of their manufactured goods into China. This is our target. And through this effort, we can find in the tariff part, from this figure, it's very clearly that China, we are kept cutting down the tariff. And just from the beginning of this month, the average and most favored nation tariff is now 75%. So if compare with the other countries from the weighted tariff, we can find even in the year 2016, China was almost the country that have the lowest average weighted average tariff in the world. Now, after this month, I think China now have a more competitive import tariff. And on the trade facilitation part, we use the trade facilitation index. We can also find a clue of improvement. We try to improve the environment. And for the FTA, my Japanese and Korean colleagues all talk about their FTA in China. Since the first FTA with Chile in 2005, we began to have more and more FTAs in the world. Nowadays, we have signed 17 FTA in world 25 economies, and there are another 12 FTAs under negotiation, and 10 FTA is under joint research. So nowadays, China is also trying to broaden its FTA network. And we can find the tariff, the FTA, and the facilitation are done step by step. And since our 30th five-year plan, China start its new round of opening, try to be a more open economy. So we can find here, since the year 2013, China step by step established 12 free trade zones. In these zones, the regulation on trade, on FDI, and on service are more loose, not so strict. So a more open China through these pilot zones. And this year, we also do some institutional reform on the trade. One reform is we combine some government institutions. Now Chinese customers is in charge of all the trade-related issues, and especially the TBT and the SPS. And the standard now are regulated by a new institution called AQSIQ. So the government functions are more focused, more concentrated. So it will speed up the efficiency. And another reform this year is we speed up the customer's procedure and require the local customer to finish the customer clearance in 2 hours, if no other things, and try to reduce the tariff. Just in the latest 12 months, China actively reduced tariff by 4 times. And the latest one is since November the 1st. And also begin to open the service market and begin to use a negative list to regulate FDI. That is the total trade-related policies in China. And regarding LAC, Latin America region, we find that the China and Latin America region, our bilateral trade benefited from Chinese trade policy reform. Here, I showed the trade volume, the import and export during the past 40 years. You can find, especially in the new century, the trade was increased by 20 times, very quick. And also on the FDI part, nowadays, LAC region is China's second largest sources of FDI, and also China's second largest destination of Chinese FDI. And here you can find the largest share of Chinese FDI is not in the mining, but instead in the leasing and commercial service. That means 1/3 of Chinese FDI is connected with trade, and also of a lot of other sectors connected with trade. So here we find the bilateral economic relations are benefited by the trade policy reform. And nowadays, if we talk about Chinese trade arrangement in LAC, we can find in the tariff part, we do not have too much problems because most of the goods, especially in the goods that take a big share in LAC's export China, the Chinese tariff is zero or almost zero, very low. So tariff is not a problem, and we want to smooth the trade. We also have some trade-related arrangement. The first arrangement is FTA. Nowadays, China signed FTAs with Chile, Peru, Costa Rica. And now where the China-Panama FTA is under negotiation. China-Colombia FTA is under a joint research. And last year, we used the gravity model to evaluate the Chinese FTA with Latin American countries. We find the FTA do facilitate the trade, do improve the trade. It's very useful. And on the other sectors related to trade, that is bilateral investment treaties and avoidance of double taxation agreements. We can find here, we have the first one, we have 13 treaties and we have 7 agreements. These treaties and agreements and help and improve Chinese investment in LAC region and facilitate the bilateral trade. And the very new thing is nowadays in China, we have the Belt and Road Initiative. We try to sign MOU with LAC countries, and till the end of last month, China have signed 14 MOU with LAC countries. And according to Chinese investigation, we do some empirical investigation. We find the BNR MOU do facilitate the trade. And the Chinese trade with BNR partners takes a very large share in our overall trade. So this trade agreement do help a lot. So here we find some good things. The tariff, it is good, and the trade arrangement, it is also good. But we also have some challenges on the trade policies. The first part, the challenge comes from the trade remedies. And here I listed the anti-dumping against China from the top 20 players, and we can find the Latin American countries, including Argentina, Mexico, Brazil, Colombia, are the largest countries take anti-dumping measures against China, while in Chinese anti-dumping measures, and we do not find some Latin American countries. So notice this kind of trade remedies, trade protection measures are imbalance. And another challenge is, although we know the tariff itself is slowing down, but if we use some quantitative measure to calculate the trade restriction, we have a trade restriction index. And we find, although the trade restriction index itself was decreasing, but the restriction among the main partners, for example, Brazil, the restriction is still very high. And another part is both China and our LAC partners, we used to have higher restrictions on our competitive goods. So the trade restrictions do have some problems. And we also have some surveys. And from the surveys, we find some challenges. The most complaint problems from SPS, TBT, and from customers procedure, and also from e-commerce corporation. Of course, we try to reflect the questions, the problems from Chinese side. We find these problems, we find these challenges. And in the future, we know nowadays China is having its first import-expo in Shanghai. And President Xi Jinping made speech in this expo and said, in the future, we'll have this import-expo each year. And in the future, there's a few tendencies for Chinese trade policy. The first is we can find China will encourage more import. To do so, we'll broaden the import products. We'll continue cut off tariff and try to improve trade facilitation. And the second tendency is to liberalize the market. And the third is create a world-class business environment. And the third, improving the opening up a more open market. And the end, to push forward multilateral and bilateral cooperation. And for China and the LAC cooperation, and to match the future reform, I think we should do some things. And I think on the top list should be trade facilitation. We should cooperate more on customers' procedure, on e-commerce, on something like this. And second, according to our empirical work, we find FTA do help our bilateral trade, and China are active in sign FTA. I think we should have more cooperation. And third, the trade-related mechanism do help. So in the future, we should improve the bilateral mechanism building. And nowadays, a lot of trade remedies. And I think that in the future, maybe need more talks than punishment. And thank you.